Today's lesson covers section 6.6, the percent equation. First, let's do a quick review how to solve these problems using the percent proportion. It is good to know going into this that these are the exact same types of problems. The equation is just simply another method you can use to solve them. So yesterday, we talked about using the percent proportion, and I asked you to memorize this. The fact that a proportion is two equivalent ratios, and percents are always based out of 100. So 100 always goes on the bottom. Your percent always goes on the top. Now we also talked about how fractions are always the part out of the whole or the total. But upon investigating, we realized that there's really even a better shortcut. And the shortcut is percents are always going to be out of 100. However, the total always comes after the word of. So whatever number comes after the word of is your total. It goes on the bottom. And then whichever number is by the word is goes on the top. So let's use that percent proportion to solve this percent problem. 40 is what percent of 50? So I know I'm going to solve this using a proportion. 100 always goes on the bottom right. Now I look and I see what else I can fill in. Well, here's of, and the number 50 comes after the word of. So 50 needs to go on my bottom. Now I have 40 by the word is. So 40 needs to go on top. So what I'm looking for in this problem is my percent. And I don't know that. And in math, when I don't know something, I use a variable. And since it's a percent, I'm going to use P. So I remember to write my answer in percent form. So from here, it's just a proportion. And I have three methods for solving proportions. The first thing that I look for is an easy relationship. And if you look, there is a simple relationship between 50 and 100. Remember that it's always multiplication or division and never addition or subtraction. So since I multiplied by 2 on the bottom, I simply need to multiply by 2 on the top, which would be 80. But again, I'm looking for a percent, and 80 out of 100 is 80%. Now, when you use the method of turning these into equations, there is simply two things you need to know. And one is, in math, is represented by the symbol of an equal sign. And then the word of simply means multiplication. So if you can turn those two words into symbols, you can turn these problems into equations. And this is what it looks like. Down here, is becomes an equal sign. So instead of 40 is what percent of 50, that means 40 equals whatever's on the other side. Well, as you know, we're looking for a percent. And in math, when we don't know something, we use a variable. So since it's since it's percent, I'm going to use P. Of means multiply, and there isn't any other better way to write 50 than 50. Now that looks confusing because it looks like your x is maybe a variable. We don't like that. So instead of P times 50, we're just going to write that as 50p because that means the same thing. And I still had 40 over here. So all I did by changing is to an equal sign and of to a multiplication symbol and substituting a variable in for what I don't know, I have a simple equation. So to get p by itself, I am going to divide by 50. And 40 divided by 50. I could simplify that as a fraction first, which would be 4 over 5. So if you want to do that, do it. It makes it easier. You can either do 40 divided by 50, or you could do 4 divided by 5. I'll just do 40 divided by 50. 50 can't go into 40, but it can go into 400 8 times. That's a decimal. And I already know how to change decimals to a percent. I move it 2 places to the right. So just like a couple of minutes ago, solving this exact same problem using the proportion, my answer is 80%. Let's do 2 more examples, changing these into equations. First thing, I'm going to change is to an equal sign. I'm going to change the word of to multiplication. Then I'm going to rewrite any other words as symbols or numbers that make math a little easier. 12, I'm going to leave the same. 30%, we don't ever multiply by percents, so I am going to change this to a decimal. So that is 0.3. And what number? I don't know what that is, so I'm going to call it n. So again, I don't like that multiplication sign in there, and I know that I can just put a number next to a variable, and that means multiply. So now this means 12 is equal to 0.3n. Well, you want to isolate the variable, so you divide by 0.3 on both sides. This is simply dividing by decimals. You learned how to do this in elementary school. You need to move this decimal to the end, so you would have to move the decimal over 1 time and bring it up. And now you're going to look at 3 into 120. 3 can't go into 1, but it can go into 12 4 times. And 3 goes into 0 times. So 12 is 30% of the number 40. Now, let's look at the next example. I'm going to start by changing is to an equal sign. After the equal sign says what number? That's something I don't know. In math, when I don't know it, I call it a variable. Of means multiply. I don't multiply by percents. I change them to decimals, which would be 0.6, and there's 15. So to solve this one, all I have to do is take 15 times 0.6, which, if you move that decimal back 1 place, would be 9. 60% of 15 is 9. There you have it.